It's interesting. I think I mentioned in my review, but I'm very cognizant of the fact that I have had little to no exposure to ultra processed foods throughout my life. And I realize how fortunate I am to be in that kind of situation. Now, sure, I'm sure there are things I've eaten in my, teenage years that were
Of
full of all,
course.
but for
Yeah.
the most part, I don't have a diet heavy in ultra processed foods at all. And since reading that book, I've basically eliminated most of those. Touching upon something that we spoke about in the past when we were talking about meat alternatives,
Mm,
you mentioned to me that the majority of these meat alternatives are ultra processed. And
yeah.
it was only recently I looked at the ingredient list of some of those meat alternatives that one can find in the supermarket or in a specialty store. And I
Yeah.
was I was actually quite shocked because that makes you, is it's good for the planet, but absolutely terrible for me. Like, so how
Right.
do you work that one out,
Right.
right?
Well, then is it good for the planet, right? Like these, because the farming practices for these ultra processed food crops
Right, right,
are
like
are
so, yeah.
not good. So I agree, maybe if you're looking at like how much water does it take and versus an animal, like yes, there's definitely some benefits there. But when you look, a little bit deeper into, what are the soy crops or the wheat crops, that are used to make these alternatives, what are they doing to the environment? Because we're not, those aren't small organic, fields, right? Like of, tiny little soy fields and
Mhm,
cute
mhm.
little corn. I mean, they're, really detrimental to the soil. And so, that's not healthy, for the environment. So yeah, and they're definitely ultra processed. I mean, mildly processed would be the best option, I think, for
Sure.
those meat alternatives, but most of them are very ultra processed.
Well, I'm wondering if a slight health scare I had towards the beginning of the year was perhaps brought on through consuming something that I considered to be reasonably healthy at the time. I was introduced to those Beyond Meat burgers by my
Mm-hmm.
sister-in-law, and there was no way I would eat that. And I tried one, I actually quite liked it. But
Mm-hmm.
over the last 4 years, it got to a point where I was eating one of those Beyond Meat burgers and a diet root beer and fries every 2 weeks when I was driving. So, I wouldn't be going to the restaurant. I would go to the drive-through and have that. And that became a
Right.
regular part of what I was eating. So I've
Mm-hmm.
cut that out entirely and I'm
Yep.
feeling a million times better. So, I mean, with all of your diet products, there's always a flip side to that as well when you're talking
Oh
about the
yeah.
artificial sweeteners and the like.
Oh my gosh.
And
If people want to drink soda versus diet soda, I just say drink the soda. I mean,
yeah,
the artificial sweeteners are such a chemical concoction that have been shown time and time again to destroy our microbiome, to actually cause obesity instead
right.
of like
Yes.
what
Yeah.
most people drink them for, which is to, like hopefully lose weight. It's been shown to do the opposite. So, I mean, if you're going to have a soda, just have the soda, try to make it once in a while. But those artificial sweeteners are bad. And so again, when we look for things, labels like, oh, sugar free, it's like, oh, free of sugar. No, I mean free of sugar, but sugar free usually means artificially
Yeah.
sweetened.
Yeah.
Which again is just not, it's throwing our signals off, our hunger signals, our insulin. I mean, it's just a mess. Like our body doesn't know quite what to do with that. And again, has been more correlated with weight gain than weight loss, which again is why most people are having, diet sodas or things that are artificially sweetened. So that information, again, that disconnect, between like what we're eating and what it's doing to our body, is huge. I mean, the gap is really big. And the problem, I think, too, with you know uh, any one company, if they're cereal or soda or this kind of processed meats, etc. The problem is that maybe one of those things every once in a while wouldn't be a
Yeah.
problem. Like if
Yeah.
we just had xanthan gum in something we had every once in a while, if we just had artificial sweeteners every once in a while, but cumulatively, it's such a big impact. But because it's cumulative, it gives each individual kind of an excuse of like, well, it's not just artificial sweeteners. It's not just xanthan gum. It's not just, this emulsifier. It's not just artificial colors. And all that's true, but it is cumulatively
Yes.
impacting us. And so that's part of the problem. And it's the same thing that happened with smoking. So they didn't have to prove that smoking caused lung cancer. They just had to kind of instill some doubt that it might not. And then we're like, well, who really knows? I'm just going to keep
Yeah.
smoking. And
Yeah.
it's kind of the same here. It's like, well, I don't really know. So I'm just going to keep getting the food that I'm getting because it makes me happy. It's inexpensive. My kids like it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to call it a day. So it's that confusion. It's either the lack of information or the conflicting information that makes most people throw their hands up in the air and be like, I'm just going to eat whatever I want because who even knows what a fact is at this point.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, was there one element of the book that really stuck out for you, really hit home, or perhaps angered you more than any other piece?
Well, I would say that I was refueled by like the follow the money,
Yeah.
you know, eh, the whole idea, that like big companies can, put out studies. They can, obtain these large, ingredients for a less amount. They can, they have the money legally to, to pay the fines, to go to court, to call Pringles a cake or whatever. I mean, these crazy things, the finances that are behind these big companies, I think is it I knew it and it refueled me. And so I think that, for all of us, and I think outside of food, right, we can always follow the money. And unfortunately, in a case for our food, following the money and what does good for stockholders and the bottom
Yeah.
line is not what is good for us as humans.
Correct.
And that is going to be a conflict, I think, until some regulations come into play. And I mean real regulations, not regulations that are funded by the, entities that they're
Yeah.
supposed to
Toothless
be
regulations.
regulating,
Yeah.
but real regulations because the companies aren't going to do it on their own. The company, this one company is not going to like take a stand because none of the other companies are taking a stand. So now their, stockholders are like, well, wait, why aren't you making any money? So it's just that I think just it refueled me into be like, yeah, it's kind of like a David and Goliath. And we really have to, it's going to be grassroots and by demand. So, even like plant-based, food options, right? There are more coming out because more people want them, good, bad, or otherwise. But I think what we ask for and what we buy and how we can, how we vote with our dollar, we spend, we tell them what we want. And that's really the only way. They're not going to do it out of the goodness of
Right.
their hearts. They're not going to change their ways. And so I think it's going to be a combination of regulation and then our personal education, advocating for ourselves and our family to make decisions that are best. If we can, if we have, the financial means, if we have the resources to do that. And back to, shaming people that eat ultra processed food, it's never the goal. I don't think of anybody that is, truly of health and wellness and that is their goal and that's their passion. It's we want you to have the information and do whatever you're able to do with your
Yes.
current situation, whether that's financial or distance, access. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons that somebody would partake in ultra processed foods, and it's never with the idea of shaming. It's really just like supporting so that everybody
Yeah.
feels their best, and can go about life like, vibrant and thriving.
I think the thing that stuck in my head the most from this book was the insidious nature of big food and the way that, getting back to the idea of making profits for shareholders, they've kind of saturated the Western market. Although Coca-Cola is wanting every single person in Western democracy to drink at least one Coca-Cola a day, and they say they see that as being a potential market if not
Yeah.
everyone is having a Coca-Cola a day.
Yeah.
No, I'm not singling out Coca-Cola here in particular, but the thing that I found most insidious was how they're trying to break into new markets, and the story about the Nestle floating mall, which goes into
Oh,
the interior
in
of
Brazil,
South America. Yes, yeah, yeah. To get these people hooked on crappy ice creams and chocolate bars.
under
Because,
the guise of healthy
yeah,
food,
yeah,
right? Under the guise of safe, sanitary, healthy food
yeah.
that now they're addicted to. And, all over the place, we're moving away from like our culture, our
Yeah,
instinctual eating. I mean, I know I agree. I was like fired up.
yeah, that I think that made me the other thing, and I had read about this before in Mark Schatzker's book, The Dorito Effect. You mentioned Pringles there, and that whole idea about the Pringle being the shape that it is, the curvature fits directly on top of one's tongue, so it fires
Yeah,
off every single one of the taste buds, tells the taste buds that you're going to be getting this hit of like meaty, umami,
yeah,
flavorful, satisfying. And as soon as it goes down your throat, your stomach gets, oh, I've got this horrible bit of processed potato paste.
yeah,
Oh, maybe if I have another one, I'll get that.
yeah.
Hence,
Exactly.
the whole
Yeah.
thing, I mean, what was the marketing concept for Pringles? It was like once you pop them, you can't
You
stop or
can't,
something.
once you pop, you can't stop.
Yeah.
It's like that, there's it. Yeah,
Well, this is,
that's true.
they were telling the truth, right? They were saying the
Yeah.
quiet thing out loud in their marketing, right?
Yes, exactly.
I've always thought those were absolutely garbage. I've never been a Pringles person, so
Yeah. No, but if you have seen one, right, it
yeah.
does. It fits exactly on your tongue. So they're about as addictive as you get.
Well, thank you very much for reading through this with me, Crispin
Or
Tulleken,
this.
The Processed Peoples. Yeah. Is that a hardcover you've got there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I just got the cheap paperback.
Nothing but the best over here.
Right, right, right. Well, thank you very much for joining us at Good Food Revolution today. Lots to talk about, lots to think about, and I really appreciate getting your insight into so many factors that affect our health and well-being through food. So,
Yeah,
thank you very much once again. We'll speak to you
you
soon.
got it. It was fun.
Bye for now.